This is what comes out of the mill. It's all crushed up rock, but we have water in it, and now we're starting to add some chemicals to it because we want the magic to happen, the metals to float.
The flotation process. They add chemicals to the metals to make the metals float, and what bubbles over is all the metals that they want.
So it's 26% copper and about 74% other stuff. The silver's in there too, but it's all the metals that come out, and we'd like it to be 26 to even 28% copper is really good for us.
So did they separate?
Well, the tailings pond dam, which is called the embankment with the tailings behind it, is built from the downstream side or the back of the dam up, because you cannot build, as you come higher, you can't put rock out over the tailings because it's unstable, right? So we call it downstream construction. So the spec on the dam says that at any time while this dam is being built, it has to be 200 feet wide at the very top level. So if you're going to raise the dam, say 25 feet, you've got to go back down, and you've got to plan this like a year ahead of time, clear back down to the base of the dam and start building layers like a layer cake up the back side, so you have that 200-foot width when you raise that up, because as you raise it up, it narrows up, right? Because of the way your dirt falls. So that dam is probably 800 feet tall. You can't see that real specifically because there's waste rock dumps in front of it that kind of distort what that dam really would look like if it was just a standalone dam out in the middle of the valley. But that's a huge, there's millions and millions and millions of tons of rock in that dam. And it's designed to withstand a 6.7 Richter scale earthquake right underneath, the epicenter being underneath the dam. So it's built to Army Corps of Engineers specs. It's a self-reporting dam, and means that we as a company have wells that we check on every month, and water is an enemy to stability of rock, and if water in those wells reach a certain level, we have to report it to the state. So that's the security to the people here in the state of Montana.
And you were young once, you sang the creek song as you danced over cobblestone. You're born of wisdom of the ages, of sages' poems that we all know. And in the half-light of Divide Canyon, where the trout rise comes and goes, Big Hole River rolling by me, rolling Bali to the Gulf of Mexico. followed you once to the ocean. I felt your motion, ebb and flow. I felt your heartbeat, the pulse of my sweet Big Hole River, born of high mountain snow. And in the half-light of Divide Canyon, where the trout ride comes and goes, Big Hole River rolling by me, rolling wildly to the Gulf of Mexico.
Today.
The future of the mining industry in Montana, those nails have pretty well been drilled in or driven into the coffin. Fortunately, living in this part of the world, amongst the Rocky Mountain orogeny, we live in one of the heaviest mineralized areas in the world. But due to politics and elite liberalism, we're held at bay from any reasonable development of those resources. So most of our work is, if I had to count on making a living in Montana, I would be doing something else. Our work takes us to Russia and Alaska and Uzbekistan and Peru, places where society perhaps is more reasonable when it comes to utilization of natural resources.
What are your main imports and exports?
They would be tools utilized in the drilling industry.
ARCO at the end of the 1970s, which also coincided with the development of some pretty key legislation for environmental cleanup. So when ARCO, now British Petroleum ARCO, purchased the Anaconda Company's holdings, they kind of crashed into a law called Superfund law. So essentially all of the mining interests, or most of the mining interests, became a giant liability for them. And at that same time they made an executive decision to halt the pumping of the water that flows into the Berkeley pit. And the pit began to rise, and then Butte had to start to deal with its environmental problems. At that point, a lot of key citizens within the community, led by people like Don Peoples Sr. here, started to do some brainstorming to try to figure out what the next version of Butte was going to look like in the late 20th century. And they decided that one of the things that they had to do was diversify the economy. That for too long, Butte was a company town only. And what happens when the company shuts down, the town kind of atrophies. And what they decided was that they needed to create different vital sectors of the economy, to try to seek federal monies, to try to build up local small businesses. And really I wouldn't call it an economic exuberance, but right now Butte economically is a much more diverse economy than it was then, so that people make their living doing a number of things, including environmental restoration, environmental education, in addition to places like REC and Residine. There are a number of technological companies that live here on top of that. So it was a response to, you either were going to die or you're going to recreate yourself.
Yeah. So environmental-wise, in